Ready Player One. So I saw it yesterday. Um, it wasn't a good movie. I actually enjoyed it because there were parts of the movie that they got right. Specifically, the character of James Halliday and his scenes were perfect, and the guy playing him was brilliant and played him perfectly. And so I found that satisfying, and I liked that idea of the kind of very awkward, um, probably autistic in some way guy who just wants to connect with people, and doesn't is far better off in this artificial world and stuff like that. So that was great. I suppose the big failing of the movie, which is a big failing, is the actual artificial world, the Oasis, just looked like shit. It just looked kind of grey, drab, and murky, and you couldn't really tell what was happening. And maybe this is me being old or something, but I could not even see what was happening really. Like when they're having the race, when they're having the war at the end, I just couldn't see what was going on. Like I looked up afterwards in the Wikipedia because I was interested in the whole thing of getting the licenses for everything and how that affected them. And apparently they had a license for Lara Croft, for Sonic the Hedgehog, for all these characters. I never saw them. They must have spent a lot of money just to have Sonic the Hedgehog in the background somewhere. I didn't see him. I saw Duke Nukem for like a second, and then he got shot. I was like, was that Duke Nukem? It kind of looked like him. And then when there were things that they had that were kind of more obscure by modern standards, like say the Holy Hand Grenade from Monty Python, to an average audience or younger audience, it's kind of obscure. It's like an old movie from the 60s or something, 70s. But then they didn't even use that quite right. Like I think it's supposed to go ah or something, when it explodes, like kind of a joke that it's holy. But that didn't happen. Like it had the cross on it. So it's very hard to know what a young audience that doesn't know the references makes of it, and people that didn't see the book. Because I kind of found certain scenes satisfying, but they didn't really tie together. Like, so here's this guy. He's obsessed. James Halliday is obsessed with 80s culture. Loves 80s culture, loves these old-fashioned adventures and things. But then when you see his world, it has no connection to that whatsoever. Which I suppose is fine in the movie, it's just that his challenges are kind of related to that. Well, the first one isn't really at all, it's just a race. So it's very kind of bit lazy movie. Let's just turn it into a race, that's more exciting. But maybe it's naive of me to say, but like the thing where he's fighting the guy in the arcade machine, like that could be made interesting if it's done well enough. You might think, oh, it's boring for a movie. Not necessarily, and if it's humorous, and if there's this, it's a humorous scene in the book. Like there's this big skeletal lich lord, and he's playing this arcade machine. It could be very amusing. And you don't even have to know the game. You just know this is for a young person. Oh, this is a really weird old arcade game that this. It almost fits that this old creature is playing and stuff, and all that kind of thing. But they obviously were afraid to go to that level, and that was sort of the big kind of failing of the movie. Like it's almost like, obviously, and that's how movies are now. They have to make it hugely appealing, as broadly appealing as possible. But that's kind of not what Ready Player One is. Ready Player One has all these specific references to a specific time. So, it's even like I'm 31, so it's even a little bit for people a little bit older than me maybe, but I still like it because I'm interested in all that stuff, the really old arcade games. I didn't grow up with them, but I always found them interesting. Kind of into my 20s I started looking at them. I was like, oh, these are really cool, these primitive games, and stuff like Zork. So in the book, he's transported to a real world version of Zork, which is this kind of text adventure, primitive text adventure, where it's like, you are in a field, there is a house next to you, and they obviously didn't want to do that in the movie because they were like, no one knows what Zork is. But isn't that okay? Like, if you just feed people always what they know already, you'll eventually just be like eating your own tail, and it won't be any good. Like if you gave them Zork, the old guys, the old nerds, There's always a mixture when you go to a movie like this. You see the little kids, who really it's for them in a way because they're so excited. But then you see the old nerds, or like the 4-year-old guy sitting up front, and you're like, geez. But anyway, it's for him too. He wants to see it as well. I want to see it at 31. Bit of a man-child, let's face it. So those of us who know Zork and stuff like that would be like, oh wow, cool. It's really like Zork, but in real life or something. And that was the other thing. Like it makes sense in a way. Okay, you're in this artificial world, we'll do it all CG, but then it doesn't look real. And in a sense, that's the point of the artificial world. Like it's convincing enough to be like reality. So instead of showing all these impossible things and people skiing up Egypt and stuff like that, why not have it more kind of grounded in reality? And even if you had, like, when people go back and watch Back to the Future, it's a real car. The DeLorean is a real car, and Marty McFly like sits into a real car. But then the movie, it's CGI like everything else, you know. And one positive thing I'll say about the CGI is that the CGI characters, the girl especially, are very expressive and very human, and in their movements and the way they talk and everything, they're kind of quite good. So that's good. They're even in a sense more expressive. Like the main fella in real life is kind of a bit bland compared to the kind of CGI characters. But anyway, back to Zork. I guess the point is, young people who don't know it would be like, what's this? What's Zork? What's going on? But they might be curious, they're young, they'll be like, oh, I'll go look that up. Then they go look it up. If they're really curious and have a lot of time, they might even find a way to download it and play it, and they might be like, holy gosh, this is like the history of the games I play today. And it'd be good for them. But if you're sort of afraid that, and you're like, oh, just show them what they know, just show them a bit of Halo, and like I think, was One Planet supposed to be Doom? It was like the Doom. I couldn't tell if it was Dune or Doom. I guess it was Doom, but it looked like the new Doom games. So just kind of like, let's say, grey, drab, kind of dirty, war, future war, stuff like that. The Gears of War or something. Why not have the classic Doom elements? And that would give the movie like a visual style. Like all the CGI just looks like the same shitty crap flying around. Now the one reprieve of that was the Shining scene, and that was funny. Like I had planned to go to see The Shining that day, but instead I went to Ready Player One because it was kind of earlier in the day, and I said, I just want something fun. I watched a horror movie the day before, watched The Witch or something, and then I was like, oh, Shining is in this, so that's cool. So I get a little bit of Shining anyway, and I admired that, like, cause in the book there's a scene where he goes into the movie War Games, with Matthew Broderick. And it's kind of bizarre, and I thought, no, they're not going to do this in the movie. They're not going to be kind of brave enough to do something so that would take you out of the movie and have this obscure movie. Then they went with The Shining, which, it was awesome to see the sets recreated so perfectly, and that was kind of cool because it also gets into this idea you're in this fake artificial world where you can be anywhere, and it's kind of populated by old pop culture. Like, that worked. Then I think they didn't know what to do with it. Like, The Shining is a really adult, serious, dark movie, and one of its most famous scenes, they do the scene, and it's not suitable. Like, it's a 12s movie. It's this naked lady comes out of a bath, and they try to be humorous with it. It's not appropriate. It's all about, and then she turns into an old lady, so it's really a strong image of like death and all this sort of thing. And then obviously they lose their bottle, and they're like, okay, we can't be in this movie, this is too weird, and she turns into a zombie, and it just becomes a bunch of CGI shit again, and zombies flying around. But for just a short time, you're like, oh, interesting, they're going to do this, but they don't kind of follow it through. So, and there was other stuff worked, like the evil corporation, the asshole guy. I felt like Spielberg, he was more involved with obviously these parts. CGI, maybe he didn't know what the hell was going on, but these parts are actually kind of nice, and they do feel like a throwback kind of 80s movie, and it's kind of tongue-in-cheek. And then it's not too harsh. Like, the asshole guy kind of comes around a bit at the end, and you know, it's just a silly ending. He gets into a cop car or something. So overall, it was a missed opportunity. I wish they had gone more into the obscurity. You know, allowed themselves to be weird. You know, allow themselves to just dive into this retro world and like take their time with it and see things like, oh, that's the car from Christine, and you know, if kids don't know, give a little explanation. Say this is this possessed car, and they'll be like, oh, funny, okay, and then learn a bit. Like that used to be more in movies. You know, you'd learn a little bit while you're watching it or something. So a disappointment, not as horrible as when I saw the trailer. Like everyone, I was like, oh god, you know, good elements, but kind of overall a bit of a disappointment. So, alright, that's my review of Ready Player One.